WHO Talk Show.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Sir Charles.
Max.
Razor.
That's right. Back like we never left. Got to do it for the people. And we have a very, very special guest with us. When she and her team reached out, I just had to oblige. I said, now, Deanna, we got a jam-packed show, but who can say no to Miss Deanna McDonald, right? Am I right?
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show, Deanna. Because, and also thank you for partnering with us, in my humble opinion, through our Charlottesville Inclusive Media Project partners, which is Vinegar Hill Magazine and the great Sarad Davenport that wears so many hats and is so influential and has been a pillar of this community his whole life. Because you tapped us to help you out with the current initiative that you have not been in the seat of for too long, but you hit the ground running. Talk about none other than the development going on over in the Fifeville neighborhood. So you're working with Piedmont Housing Alliance, you're working with the Fifeville Neighborhood Association, and you are coordinating quite a bit as it comes to that development that I'm sure most of our listeners have heard about over there on Cherry Avenue at the old Estes Grocery. So go ahead and let the folks know sort of the inner workings of this project, how you got involved with it and what it's about exactly.
Sure. So again, thank you for having me. Mm-hmm. So I came to this project because I'm a nurse and this is my heart work. I do community health work. Okay. And so the Fifeville Neighborhood Association has been working a really long time around the projects in their neighborhood, things that are meaningful to their community. And the grocery store has been on tap for a while. There has been a grocery store there for like almost 20 years. And so that has been an issue. And I come to that issue as it relates to food access, food equity, and health disparities, right? Okay. So the built environment is a part of the social determinants of health. So taking down a grocery store or not having a grocery store is hugely impactful. And if you missed yesterday's event at the Jefferson School, Aline Carey was talking about the difference between a food desert and food apartheid, right? And I think it was Karen Washington that quoted the term food apartheid, which is basically like the systemic ability to remove food access from certain populations and what that does to those disadvantaged populations.
Do you know how many people, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your introduction, but how many people live in the Fifeville neighborhood? And are we talking like elderly disabled or families?
So the Fifeville neighborhood looks really different than it used to look. Okay. So it is classified, if you've ever seen the marker, as a historically Black neighborhood. Okay. However, it doesn't look like that anymore. And that is, in large has to do with displacement and gentrification. So there are about 5,000 residents, and I can't give you off the top of my head, but it's like the population all across Charlottesville, right? So it doesn't look like that anymore. However, the Fifeville Neighborhood Association centers the values of the marginalized people of that area, of those that have been displaced and suffered from systemic changes.
Okay. And Deanna, so what's some of the methods that you're using to outreach to the community? Like you just mentioned yesterday, you had the kickoff, I believe, of the first community-wide, I guess, or area-wide forum where folks can come in and learn and share their suggestions and concerns. So talk a little bit about that and other ways that you're trying to engage the community.
Yeah, sure. So so I came to this group a year ago, and we've been talking about we need to engage the community, right? We need to have collective bargaining, right? Because you can't do it alone. And the Fifeville Neighborhood Association are just that, neighbors, regular people with jobs, some of them 2-3 jobs. So with my company coming on board, we decided to do a community engagement initiative. And it was funded by a grant from CACF. And so because they were like, we needed grant writers. Like, how can we get this money? Because there is no money in the Fifeville Neighborhood Association.
CACF?
Yes, the Charlottesville Area Community Foundation. So
the biggest grantors like in the region.
Yeah. So they got a grant from them. And so we are using that to hire community advocates. So we are asking the community, if you have people located in the Rose Hill neighborhood, the 10th and Page neighborhood, the Fifeville neighborhood, and the Ridge Street neighborhood, we focus those 4 sister neighborhoods to this historically Black neighborhood. also historically Black neighborhoods. We focus those, but we also understand the reach and the call for, this is a call to action for anybody who connects with this space in this place, because this was a hub of Black Charlottesville. So we're asking all people to come to this call. If you want to write a grant, if you know someone who's a philanthropist that wants to donate funds to support this grocery store, if you know an entrepreneur that wants to own a grocery store, please report to this conversation. And so I started with the neighborhood association leaders because my mama raised me right, and you got to get permission to go to somebody's house.
Right.
Period.
Right.
So I started with them. Absolutely not. And they gave us permission to do this work, and they said it's much needed. And so this is really from the heart of what they say that they want in that neighborhood. They want to bring a grocery store back. And so the community engagement design started with those leaders. We kicked off the first at-large community forum yesterday at the Jefferson School. We're going to have another one September 4th at 5:30 p.m. at the Jefferson School. And that one's going to focus on the possibility of a community-owned grocery store. So anybody wanting to invest in their community, come to the conversation. Anyone interested in what does community-owned look like? Because we also understood we need some education around that, right? Charlottesville has never had a community-owned or co-op model.
So give us a quick lesson on that. What does that mean?
So the co-op model means where you would buy ownership. You would buy, just like you go to Walmart, Sam's Club or the big Walmart club and buy a membership. You would buy a lifelong membership in that model. But when you buy that membership, you also buy a vote. So you have a stake, a say in who's hired, what things are carried in that store. You have a say of who's running. You also have a say in government, right? Because once you start controlling some of those dollars, you have a say in who's listening to you, right? So it's about bringing power back to the community, not corporations taking money out of the community, but right here, staying here in the community.
Now, when you talk about power in the community too, a part of that is, like you said, the faces change of the neighborhood. What are some of the methods that you've learned about or that is being talked about when it comes to like, how do we, like, the importance of home ownership and the importance of not just buying in for commercial space, but also buying in to make sure that the neighborhood and the community still looks reflective of its diversity.
Right. And that's a challenging conversation.
And history.
Right. So these neighbors, especially the ones that have been there all their lives, they're looking at their house that may have been bought for $20,000 now going up for, $1 million, $500,000 right behind that. And then their taxes go up. The families are having hard times paying the taxes, trying to keep the family homes. They're getting calls from people that want to buy their homes and flip them. Right. So holding on to land, because they ain't making any more land, right? Holding on to those properties means a lot, right? But again, I think it takes community. I think and sometimes in our community, like, we don't talk about what we're going through, right? We don't talk about the fact that we might not have access to fresh fruits and vegetables that we're eating out of a can because that's what we can get to, right? And so we got to make it real for the people, that these are real people that need to report to the conversation, and we need to do it together. Sometimes we're so spread out, and it's not by accident. Charlottesville a lot operates in silos. That is not by accident. When you separate people, again, they don't have that collective bargaining, that collective weight and power.
And has this process or this conversation reached a point where or the organizers have reached out to city officials, or I'm thinking maybe the city manager and people like that, just to have a conversation of this is our priorities, this is what we'd like to see happening and what we're planning? So
this actually started out of a Charlottesville small area plan. So the Fifeville Neighborhood Association has been doing the work. They've been in conversations with the city, been in conversations with UVA. And again, they got this unique agreement with this developer because the developer owns it, right? So we're talking about trying to get them to do what the community wants, right? They own it. They could do what they want, but they have this agreement that they will hold a space, 5,000 square feet, hold that space for a grocery store for a certain amount of time. So we've got this big push, hopefully trying to find interested people by November, right? until they have a certificate of occupancy, means when the building is up and ready to go, they have committed by this engagement that the city helped them do with this developer and hold that space for that time.
Is there a building on the land now? I'm not too familiar with the Fifeville area, so I don't know.
Yeah, so this is the old Estes building.
Okay.
People here are nostalgically associated with. It was a hub.
Yeah.
Estes would serve the people. You could run a tab. They weren't worried about whether you could pay it back or not. This was a place where if you needed food, you could go get it. Also, Sarad mentioned yesterday he learned how to play checkers in the parking lot of the old Estes. So this was a community hub. And so, yes, the old Estes building, it will be torn down and it's going to be redeveloped. And Charles mentioned that we work in partnership with PHA. So I just want to clarify some things. There are entities. PHA is an entity associated with Woodard to build these affordable housing. And everybody knows what affordable housing is different to other people, right? It's not the same for me or you. So what affordable housing looks like. Fifeville actually really got into that conversation to help bring down what affordable is going to look like also there. So they're working on that. From that perspective.
Deeply affordable.
But this community engagement is all Fifeville. This is not a partnership. The developer is not in on this community engagement. PHA is not in on this community engagement. This is Fifeville saying, we want to engage our community. We need our community, and we hope they will come and answer our call and support us.
And I want to make sure that the listeners don't miss something either. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you all, the community, I feel as a whole, the association would much rather it be Black businesses, Black developers, and folks who are helping to take ownership of these projects and commercial spaces. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. So just to clarify, Fifeville has values that center the historical context of that neighborhood. So it is centered, and they say we center Black ownership, Black leadership, but they understand what the political area looks like. So we talk about the marginalized and disenfranchised, right? So they understand that context, but they absolutely do, which is why the marketing said, buy back the block, right? There is no Black ownership in a historically Black, no commercial ownership, to be clear, ownership in a historically Black community. And that's what they're saying. So they are prioritizing. Again, community looks different. They work with everybody. They're working with the developer. They're working with PHA. They work with the other businesses in that building, in that community. So, we understand that it takes us all.
And there's Black businesses, but they don't own their spaces.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
And
right?
that is the difference.
They don't own the land.
They don't own the land. And you will hear like a couple of them are like, oh, this developer owns the place that I rent from right now. Right. So the developer owns like the block. And that's why it was marketed to those people that understand that. Like, come to this because we want to get a piece of the block.
I know Razor has a question for you. I was curious what role UVA, because you said you all were in conversation with UVA, what role they would have in this project. But I know Razor has a question as well.
Did you want to answer Max's?
Yeah, sure. So at this moment, UVA is not in on this project, right? And so let me be clear. We have conversations and we ask for all the community to come. We send out the email blast, come if you want to be and partner in this work. So they send all different agents, send their partners, and we engage in conversation. But actively, UVA has not committed to any part of this grocery store conversation. And I think, the same thing goes when we talk about systemic. The city can report to this conversation if they want to make sure a grocery store is built there. UVA, if there's a philanthropist, and if this couple of people in the community want to come together, form a corporation, form a nonprofit, a group, and organize around a grocery store, we are operating from possibility.
Okay.
How you doing? Thank you for everything that you're doing. The question I would have is, here in Charlottesville, you have like what's known as like the Black elitists, and then you have the people who've grown up here, and then you have like the implants is a bad word, but the people from outside of Charlottesville that came here and they're doing things, right? Have y'all developed to where the person has to be from Charlottesville, or if they don't have a stellar credit report, or that, they might have some hiccup, they might match the community that they're trying to serve? What I'm pretty much asking is, even though we may want it to be Black, are we going to have rules and regulations that pretty much only allow a certain percentage of us to even sit down at the table?
So you make a good question and a good point in who can own here. And the Fifeville Neighborhood Association does not get to say who can. They get to make a recommendation to the developer. That person or group or entity still has to go through the processes of finding the funding and all of the things to own property. What we hope in this is that, like I said, we're looking for grant writers, people who, you may be a developer that wants to come and be an advisory board to the Fifeville Neighborhood Association. We are looking for all resources, somebody that could help groups like that, or somebody who may just have a dream of owning a grocery store and don't know how to do it, right? So can somebody come along and partner and walk alongside them, and let's get to the finish line? As you mentioned about the elitists versus the who been here versus come here, I engage in that conversation quite differently because my family goes back 5 generations here. My great grandfather helped build the railroad that brought commerce to Charlottesville. And so, but I was raised in Philadelphia. I spent every summer coming here. I was here. My grandmother's here. Like my mother's here. We are all here. And I've been doing work in this community for over 20 years. And so people will still be like, oh, she's not from here. And I'm like, I'm from here. You can't tell my grandma that. You know what I mean? So what does that look like?
And why are we talking about that?
And why are we talking? Thank you. And so that's why we wanted people to understand that even though with the grant funding that we got, we could not reach the whole community. We can't reach all of Charlottesville and Albemarle, but you can report to the conversation. We're going to have hopefully a developer conversation where people can come get the answers, the straight answers, the truth, because I operate in transparency. We're not hiding and magicians. We're not doing that. So come to the conversation. If you really want to know, come and ask the hard questions. Make somebody answer you. That's what we want to do.
Good
so
stuff.
I'm wondering, the land and the building itself will be owned by the developer.
Yes. So he owns it right now. That company owns it right now. And it's kind of like condoing it out.
Yeah.
So it'd be 2 commercial space. One is right now dedicated to the MRC. And then there's this other commercial space that is currently committed for a grocery store, again, until that first certificate of occupancy.
Okay. So I'm wondering about the terms. So will there be a term on the land or the building, as far like a lease, if you will? And all the lease could be for 80 years or 100 years. But I mean, we see this in different housing developments and commercial developments around the city. There's a lease. That lease ends. People are short-sighted in a sense because they think 100 years is a long ways away. But that time comes, and then the person who actually, or the company that actually owns the building has some options, whether or not to renew it, whether or not to move on to the next whatever that may be housed there. How does that play a role in all of this?
So the good thing is this is the start of this. So it hasn't formed. It hasn't shaped. Again, that possibility conversation, something like that could. Somebody mentioned at the meeting last night, well, we heard y'all had partnered with PHA, saying the FNA had. PHA is in the conversation with the developer as it relates to the housing. However, PHA, through some government funding, could possibly find some funding to roll in the commercial space for the grocery store to make sure that a grocery store goes there. That is the conversation that Charles has mentioned. That would not be Black ownership, right? That would be PHA owning it, right?
PHA is moving and shaking.
So, you know what I mean? So if we don't want that to happen, we have to find a way to do something different. And so, but it's important to know that all possibilities are on the table right now. So if we have an idea of what we want, one of the neighbors from Fifeville showed up. She had her paper. She said, I got a proposal. I'm ready. I want people to mobilize. I don't want us to just walk away from this talking. And so we're going to have a conversation. September 4th is the food co-op conversation. The director from the National Co-op of Grocers is going to come here. He's going to do some education because our people suffer for lack of knowledge. So he's going to do some education up front, and then we're going to have a conversation, talk about this, and hopefully people report to the conversation. The very next day, we're going to also have coffee and conversation with people who might say, I want to know more about how we can start a community-owned grocery store, or I want to start a community-owned grocery store, or I want to start a group, that wants to start a nonprofit to start a community-owned grocery store. And that's going to be at 9 a.m. that next morning.
Okay.
I am easily accessible. RN Heart Work. That's RN as in registered nurse, heartwork@gmail.com. Easily. You can also reach out to my office, 434-218-0740. I contact everyone back that contacts me. We're going to make this as accessible as possible. If you have a need, if you want to report to this conversation, we will meet you where you are.
Okay.
Good stuff. Miss Deanna McDonald. Thank you for joining us.
I don't think we had to ask any questions, did we?
I mean, she was
on. Right.
You know her
I
stuff.
got the right one for the job.
Yes, thank you. And, keep us posted. And of course, we'll continue to be working together again. Thank you for making, in my humble opinion, a partner of this great work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I am Deanna McDonald. I am a nurse by trade. My business is RN Heart Work, Health Education Coaching and Consulting LLC. I report to the conversation about the Fifeville neighborhood grocery store as a nurse, as a health community advocate, and this is my heart work. RN Heart Work, Health Education Coaching and Consulting LLC.
IMHO Talk Show.